People who have heard deathbed confessions, what were some interesting ones? My dad had Alzheimer's and ended up in a secure ward. He was blind and almost deaf. I was visiting him one day. He didn't know who I was, but he started talking about me. He said I had done better than him in life and that he was proud of me. He was a quiet man IRL and never told me that when I was growing up. Looking back, he did things that my dumbass never realized were for me. Like, when he retired, his colleagues asked what he'd like as a present. He chose a scientific calculator. This was back in the 1970s. He had no use for it. He gave it to me for university. I thought he was just passing it on, not realizing that he'd asked for it with me in mind. My grandfather admitted to me and only me that he accidentally had sex with a man. Not my story, but that of a hospice worker who spoke to my class. For those who don't know, hospice is a method of end-of-life care that focuses on alleviating the emotional and physical pain of a dying person to ease their passing rather than combating their imminent death. One of her patients was a bed-bound woman in her 90s who was generally unresponsive but had flashes of recognition and engagement. It's hard to gauge the level to which unresponsive patients are detached from their surroundings, so they encourage family members to keep their company in hopes of soothing the patient. Now this patient was from a U.S. state that prided itself on its state university, and the university's football team. The woman's family had attended this university for 4 or 5 generations. During her hospice care, however, her great-granddaughter was the first in their family to decide to go to a different school, the rival state's university. In fact, her family was supportive of her decision but often joked about her being the rebel or Judas or what have you. One day, they were all sitting around the woman's bedside, teasing the girl about her decision. Suddenly, the patient sat up, looked at her great-granddaughter, said, "Traitor," and fucking died. My partner's grandfather never spoke about his World War II service. We're Australian. He joined after lying about his name and age, so we can't find any records. He would have been 16. We do know he was in the Pacific somewhere, and when he got back his lie was exposed, and because he was by then 18 he was drafted under his real name, and promptly arrested. He would do anything to not get sent back to fight. He got drunk, fought and self-harmed. His adult life was spent mostly as an alcoholic and being a shit husband and father, though in his later years he was able to make some good. Grandkids appearing softened him. In his dying hours he relived his time at war. Some things he said: "Oh God, they are here, the Japs are behind us, sir. Stab him, fucking stick him!" Help, medic, all around. And he also had a string of names he kept saying. Such a tortured, broken mind. When I was in hospital, the guy in the bed next to me just asked to stop taking his meds as he was ready to die. Last thing I heard him say was, "There's no one waiting for me at home, so I'm going where they are." Wasn't really a shocking confession, just a lonely and heartbreaking one. My time to shine. I worked at a hospital in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, a small town near Munich, for the last 14 years. My job there is not fancy at all. I move people around, throw the trash out, and occasionally I take care of some handy-like work, fix a leaking shower head and stuff like that. As you can imagine, I get to see a lot of patients that come and go. Some of them pass away, such is life, I guess. I remember a few instances of people confessing to me their biggest regrets. Here are some examples. An old Polish woman told me that she regretted not fucking Hitler when she had the chance. Her words: "I wanted to ask her about more context, but I was afraid to be honest." Another notable example was an old truck driver that used to work for an Easter Germany company. He told me that he once run over some kids with his truck and was too afraid to stop and check if they were okay. Once another Polish lady told me that she used to be a prostitute during Second World War and that she slept with very high-up people in the government. She told me that she did not regret that part of her life, but that she could not tell anyone, and that was a heavy emotional drag. She also told me that she aborted more than 5 babies during that time. I didn't see it, but my aunt watched her elderly mother fall down the stairs and confessed just before she died that she wasn't her biological mother. She told my aunt that her oldest sister was actually her mother. The sister had gotten pregnant too young and the mom said it was hers. A common way of handling it back then. She revealed it in her very last breath. My grandfather had pretty terrible dementia and he kept making deathbed confessions as he knew he didn't have much time left. They were often about witnessing a murder and not telling anyone, but each time he confessed to us the details changed. It happened a couple of times a day over the course of his final week. We finally figured out that he would watch the local news and hear about these things happening, then would think he had actually witnessed them. Not a deathbed confession, but the last conversation I had with my grandfather has always stuck with me. He had Parkinson's, and lived on a farm outside of town. One day he looked at me and said, "I'm getting too old to take care of Mom, my grandmother. I need you to do that for me, okay?" His health deteriorated pretty rapidly from that point onward. I still call my grandmother every single day, and try to get back home whenever I can to help out around the farm. Helped care for my dad as he died from cancer earlier this year. He would get agitated and reach his arms out and try to sit up. The last thing he said was fuck. Not sure what it was referencing, pain, drugs, or war memories, but that stuck with me. He passed very peacefully in the end. My great-grandfather was in his mid-90s when he died. Health was always good, but a benign tumor deemed too dangerous to operate on at his age went septic. He was dead a week later. I went to visit him in the hospital. My family used to see him a lot, but there was a falling out between him and my grandma several years before, so we stopped seeing them. Funny enough though, I constantly ran into him at the store and we always had nice chats. Anyway, in the hospital he told me not to worry about him. Most everyone he's ever known was dead, and he was ready to die. The week he felt himself getting sick, he knew something was off and made arrangements to get my great-grandma into a nursing home. He took care of her with her Alzheimer's, so he wouldn't die until he knew she was taken care of. They were married for over 70 years. My favorite story is that every Sunday for over 50 years, he would drop my great-grandma off at church, and then sat in the car and waited for her. Hated religion, but loved his wife lol. Mother ran a nursing home growing up. From ages 5 to 10 I spent every weekend with residents. Because I was a kid, residents often confessed stuff they thought I wouldn't understand. Two stick out, one funny, one not. Women was dying, maybe about 96. Even had her last burst of energy/life where she thought she was better. This is common. A black delivery man came with some flowers. After he left she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I can't believe I'm dying without having been with a colored man." Second one was while I was reading Bible verses to a resident. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to drop that baby in the well." Germany, post-World War II. Ruth is a young German, Felicienne, a French solitaire, falls head over heels, brought many thoughtful gifts, such as a big juicy ham for her family. They marry. His family and friends are in the south of France, but they stay in Germany. He now goes by the name Felix. They stay together, through several miscarriages, infertility. They never have children. Ruth dies first, around 2010. On her deathbed she tells him: "You know Felix, I always liked you, but I never loved you. Weich Felix, I han die immer gern gehabt, aber glied han die nie." This wasn't a deathbed confession, but more of hospice. This man was an alcoholic. This isn't usually a problem because when in hospice you can get whatever you want as long as it is legal, but he was a violent drunk and was forbidden alcohol as a result. Anyways, between his requests for alcohol, he talked about how he and a friend got into a massive fight about land and his equipment being borrowed. As a result they haven't spoken in 20 years. He said he didn't even know why it was such a big deal and regretted being that aggressive. Basically said he missed his best friend and wished they didn't lose all those years. My great-aunt passed away a couple of years ago. She was suffering from viral encephalitis and fluctuated in and out of consciousness. It was truly painful to watch, although a lot of family tended to be around her in those last days. I once happened to be alone with her when she made some fairly odd remarks, which I kept to myself since. On the day in question I was playing games on my phone in her hospital room when she started to audibly mutter to herself. It became more urgent and intense. Eventually she explicitly called me to her side. Her eyes looked huge and confused. I doubt she knew who I was. She spat out her words, most of which were barely comprehensible, putting particular emphasis on boy and ingredient apostrophe. I sat there for 15 minutes, listening to her erratic account of, as I finally gathered, how she sometimes used to cook eggs in the urine of a stable boy, instead of water. She insisted that he was handsomely compensated for his services, but now and then she started to cry and couldn't stop. I googled this weeks later, and there indeed exists a traditional dish in China described in the West as virgin boy egg. Apparently this concept had fascinated her and she frequently recreated this herself and served it to her family, which sometimes included my younger self, without explaining what it was. I am not sure if she felt shame or enthusiasm about this. She often stammered something about the secret ingredient, but it quite obviously haunted her towards the very end of her life. Not really a confession, but my cousin and I got into a car accident and he died. His friends got him to steal and vandalize so many things. They also put him in jail 4 different times. When we were in the hospital and he was about to die, his last words were, "Belp, if I go to hell at least I'll be with all my friends. I love you." My grandmother fell sick and it got worse in 2 weeks. A few minutes before dying she said, "Shift me on the another bed and remove all these stuffs and open the doors, I'm leaving now." This isn't a confession, but I just wanted to share the last thing my grandfather said to me before he passed away due to lung cancer. I was about to go to Rome for a school trip and my family told me to go to set my mind on something else for a few days, Before I left I wanted to say goodbye as it was possibly the last time I could talk to him. He told me, "Have fun boy, I'll see you next week." I went to Rome and when I came back, he was already in a deep sleep due to medication. He wanted to peacefully pass away while sleeping. I came back the next week and he was sleeping when I went to visit him. I told him everything I did in Rome even though I knew he wouldn't wake up. The next morning he passed away. My grandmother said to me, "He waited for you, I still miss him so much." Not a confession but still something that sticks out to me. My great-grandma was in the hospital going in and out of consciousness. While falling out of consciousness one time she whispered "Mama." And then she said it's beautiful. It still gives me goosebumps thinking about it. No matter if you believe in heaven/afterlife or not, I think it's really comforting. Thanks for listening. Subscribe for more daily videos.